The morning and the evening on day 19 found us in very different places. Texas highways, as it turns out, are the connection between the western U.S. and the east. It was a cool drive, but would I be able to bring my super high blood sugar reading down? That would be the question as we drove from Fort Stockton to San Antonio. "6:30 a.m. in a roadside motel in Fort Stockton, Texas. I wasn't feeling well and woke up to check my blood sugar. 477. That is extremely high. I hadn't been that high in years. In case you don't know, here's a quick overview of blood sugar. The range 70 to 130 is considered perfect. A little higher than that is fine. A brief spike up to around 200, especially after a meal, is mostly okay. Shouldn't get much higher than 200, ideally, although it does. It certainly should never get into the 300s, and the 400s can be dangerous and ought to be unheard of. And usually for me they are. For example, here are my readings over the last few days. Not great, but the average is acceptable, almost. But anyway, when it does get really high, it can be tough to bring it back down. So starting with a reading near 500, I had my work cut out for me today. In other news, we didn't even have a plan for the day when we woke up. First, I took a bunch of insulin for a tiny breakfast of applesauce and a breakfast bar, and then drove Maceo to a nearby donut place for her breakfast. And I forgot to hook up the dash cam on the way there. It's the first missed car footage of the trip. See, that's what high blood sugar does to your brain. You get foggy. Blood sugar was 330 before leaving the hotel. Still awful, but much better. We decided at the last minute to drive to San Antonio, 7 hours away, and spend 2 nights there. As I say, today was the day that we suddenly moved from Western America to Eastern America. As you pass through towns, both big and small, each with their own character, the landscape changes from rocky desert to lush green trees and farms right before your eyes. But it's all still Texas. We kept passing these signs for draws. A draw is where 2 hills meet and form a little furrow where water can run after it rains. 19 Draw and Monument Draw were cool names, but one of them had the most Texas name imaginable. I'm disappointed that Hollywood never made a movie called 6-Shooter Draw. Shortly after this road trip hit 3,000 miles, we pulled off for another picnic. Blood sugar 242. Getting better all the time, which is not easy when you're sitting motionless in a car all day. The first town we hit was Sanderson, where we stopped at a post office to mail the Big Ben postcard to ourselves. Sanderson is an Amtrak stop, although the depot was torn down a few years ago. But the town was founded by a railroad in the 1800s, and decades ago was still a real Old West spot on the map, full of unruly cowboys and train workers. Now, Sanderson is quieter and pleasant, worn but still thriving in its way. Plus, it had the last Roadrunner for us on this trip, at least the last before we come back out west. Further down the road, we passed through Dryden. I've seen Dryden mentioned on lists of ghost towns in Texas, but there are still people here. The population is maybe somewhere between 30 and 40, although other sources have it fewer than 20. Dryden featured in one of Texas's last great train robberies, which I covered in more detail in my video about the Amtrak Sunset Limited. At one point, the land got very flat and Highway 90 started sloping downward. All of a sudden, we were going across the mighty Pecos River. I'd only heard of Pecos from Yosemite Sam.
The fastest gun north, south, east, and west of the Pecos.
When I was 8 years old and watching that, I didn't even know what Sam meant by the Pecos. Turns out it's this river. The Pecos River starts around Santa Fe, New Mexico, flows down beside Roswell, Artesia, and Carlsbad, and ends up feeding the Rio Grande, a couple hundred feet south of here. It's one of America's premier rivers, a waterway grinding through the desert dust, a behemoth of the Southwest, bereft of barrier or fear, a grand, brave, gargantuan snake slithering o'er. And the Pecos is where the American West ended for us. After that, Texas was a lot more green. First, the Amistad National Recreation Area is more like marshy Florida than dusty Arizona. It's located in Val Verde County, whose name is Spanish for Green Valley. This road trip is returning us to the west in a few weeks, but it's going to be a lot of green, leafy southern vistas for a while. I wouldn't call the small town of Comstock welcoming exactly. Obey warning signs. Kind of vague and threatening, especially since I didn't notice any warning signs. Anyway, Comstock too was originally a railroad town. In the city of Del Rio, we missed our turn for San Antonio. And I'm glad that at the last minute we noticed a sign saying last chance to turn around before entering Mexico. Oops, that's not part of the plan today. Outside of Brackettville, we pulled over for another picnic. Blood sugar continued to steadily improve. 215. By the way, I've gotten some comments on these videos from people wondering why we don't make exotic foods a bigger feature of this trip. Well, all I can say is that on a long-haul road journey like this, there's just something about eating picnic food outside on a rusty table beside a highway. The breezy air and the sound of cars and the elusive locals. This is what it's all about on the road for me. And they were even thoughtful enough to give us one last bonus Roadrunner. Green Texas kept rolling by with the miles as we passed through the towns of Uvalde, considered the border of North and South Texas, Sabinal, and D'Hanis and Castroville, communities originally founded by people from Alsace, the mixed French and German region of Europe. Not something you might expect here in Central Texas, but here it is. And Hondo, Texas, infamous for its sign that says, "This is God's country. Please don't drive through it like hell." The sign was put up in 1930 by the Lions Club. The word "please" was added later to soften the tone. Maybe I've just gotten used to the smaller highways of the past few days, but the roads seemed pretty ugly and gigantic as we neared San Antonio. Fair enough, it's a big city. Our hotel was right off the interstate. Just to celebrate being in a big and multicultural city, we walked to a nearby Chinese restaurant called April's. Now, some Chinese and Japanese written characters are the same, and even with my rudimentary Japanese, I could read the name, which means April flowers. Blood sugar was down to 195 before eating. Later on TV, we saw actress Kathryn Hahn telling Jimmy Fallon about her new show, which takes place in Marfa, Texas, of all places, the town I just learned of when we drove through it a couple days ago.
Yes, Marfa, Texas. Yeah, it's like 3 hours outside of El Paso. It's like this, it feels like you're like on an island in the middle of the desert, and it's just this, it's like Brooklyn in like, it's very hip, very unforgiving landscape, and there's a crazy, amazing art scene there.
I always like it when these coincidences happen on trips like this. It's the travel gods urging you on. But all I remembered about Marfa were the dark, ominous clouds. And before bed, my blood sugar was perfect, 136. Driving from the deserts of the west to the lush fields of the east, all in one day, did the trick. A great day on the road today, across the American fulcrum. But we're still only halfway through Texas. Tomorrow is another landmark day for this trip, the first day where we didn't use the car at all. We were close enough to walk to San Antonio's awesome Riverwalk area and to the world-famous Alamo.